Oh, hi, have you been lost? Because I think you might have just been found. Yeah, this is the lost and found intro of mine. It will not stick, I promise you, it will not stick. But yeah, welcome. Hi, hello, and welcome. I don't have an intro. Also, I don't have two feelings in my teeth, but you know, let's not talk about negative things here. Let's talk about completely realistic things today. Because today is a part 2 of Happily Never After. Or, you know, the second name that didn't stick either was Maja ruining your childhood stories. So these are the real stories behind free fairy tales. If you haven't watched part 1, I highly suggest you do it. It's great. It's great. It's my very first video that I've done, so you know, just look at that and look at this now and look at the progress. Progression. Do you see my whole forehead now, or are we just gonna do this for the rest of this video? So the first story of today is the story of Hansel and Gretel, and this is truly my earliest intro to true crime. I was like, I like this is morbid, because this story truly has the least amount of changes made, because it was supposed to show the real representation of the Great Famine, which was between 1315 and 1317. The conditions during the Great Famine were so grave that women and families would just abandon their children and in some cases eat them. It was that shit. So the story that you know of is the story of Hansel and Gretel, and their family just desperately tries to leave them in the forest. Literally every day they're like, okay, hey, hello, yeah, we're having a family outing, and just drop them and run for their life. But the kids always have some stones, so they put them on the pathway and they can always return home. Well, that is until one day they, instead of stones, they bring breadcrumbs. And obviously the birds have eaten the breadcrumbs during the day, so they're just stuck. They're in the middle of the forest. Once they come up onto this candy house, so it's like a house made of candy, they're like, we're kids, we love candy. They go into this house only to be imprisoned by this old ugly woman who is like, yeah, you're gonna get food, but I'm going to cage you and feed you for slaughter, basically. But the kids cook up a plan themselves. They're like, yeah, no you won't. So once the old lady prepares to burn one of the children in the incinerator, well, the other one shoves her in there and burns the old lady herself, and the kids are saved. They return home and the parents are like, oh my god, we should have never left you. They must have brought food home in retrospect, because I mean, otherwise nothing has been resolved. Also, this Great Famine, as I mentioned, was no joke. It has impacted 300,000 people, and it was said to have killed 25% of the population of Europe during this period of time. So the moral of this story, well, if you're a parent, it's like, yeah, don't let your kids wandering in the forest. But truly the moral of this story is, don't abandon your fucking children. Like, that's the real moral here. Now, of course, there are different versions of this story. So there's the famous Giambattista Basile that I mentioned before. He wrote a story called Nenello and Nenella. So in 17th century, he wrote a story called Nilo and Nenella, about, again, two children who is like stepmother, and this evil stepmother is basically ordering the stepfather to abandon these children in the forest, but stepfather would leave them oats, and then on one occasion the donkey ate the oats and they were actually stranded there, and kind of like the same story repeated itself. The most gruesome story is the Romanian tale called The Little Boy and the Wicked Stepmother. And in this story, again, they try to abandon the children. They follow the trail of ashes back home, but when they come home, the stepmother kills the boy and orders the girl to help her like clean up and turn him into a meal. So they basically feed this boy to the dead, but the girl has put her brother's heart into like this wood, so into the bark of the wood outside. And after they cooked him, the girl also brought the bones of her brother and also put them into the bark of the tree. Talk about trauma, man, talk about PTSD. But the next morning the cuckoo has alarmed the whole family of this deed that has happened. "Cuckoo, my sister has cooked me and my father has eaten me, but I'm now a cuckoo and safe from my stepmother." So the terrified stepmother is like, "This is scandalous." So she throws like a grain of salt onto this cuckoo to shut the fuck up. But the cuckoo, but the grain of salt falls onto her and kills her. More dramatic than rolling off the stairs in a telenovela, this story, man. The less known fact about this is that the source for the story was Henriette, who was the neighbor of the Brothers Grimm. In fact, she actually ended up marrying one of the Brothers Grimm. She married Wilhelm Grimm. So, hey, it wasn't just Brothers Grimm that were high all this time writing the stories. Pussy rules the world, that's the moral of this story. Also that karma is a bitch and you shouldn't kill your stepson. Maybe. It's like Hansel and Gretel really told parents to just do better. Now on to one of my favorite stories ever. And this is the story of the Frog Prince. First of all, I actually didn't know that this is like an actual fairy tale, like as an actual plot. It has a synopsis. I always thought it's like kind of, I don't know where I thought it comes from. I was like, yeah, you kiss a prince and you kiss a frog and he becomes a prince. I thought it was like a saying. Boy, was I dumb. This is one of the best stories ever. So basically, in this story, this girl was just playing with her ball near a pond where this frog was purring on her, apparently, because frogs can be pervs too, guys. So she drops the ball and this frog starts blackmailing her, being like, yeah, I'll get you the ball if you love me and let me eat off your golden plate and let me live with you. And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever, you know, doesn't think much about it. But then she returns home and what does she know? That same evening the frog is just at the door. I wanna say knocking, probably not knocking, just like probably croaking at the door, and her father opens the door and is like, yes, Mr. Frog, please explain your visit here. And well, the frog just tells the father what happened, and the father being the special person here, he's like, yeah, you should own up to your promises. So yes, frog, you may enter the room. So the frog here goes into the princess's bedroom and the night ensues. In the normal version of the story, the frog owns up. The frog owns up to the princess and tells her he has been spelled. You know, he needs to spend 3 nights, again, 3 nights in every fucking story. So he needs to spend 3 nights eating off her plate for her to like serve him basically, and then the charm will be lifted. After those 3 days, the princess just is smitten and she kisses this frog and he turns into a prince. And they all live happily ever after. Well, actually, this story has the best ending because they abandoned the dead, apparently, who was the matchmaker clearly in this case. And they set off to this frog now prince's kingdom and they live happily many years. I love it, like it's not happily ever after. No, we have had our arguments. It's like after those few years we weren't that happy. Maybe we were divorced, you don't know. So the moral in this story is most definitely just stick to your fucking promises, right? Now of course 1812 Brothers Grimm version is just the sickest fucking thing you will think of. And this version is called the Frog King or Iron Heinrich. So in this version there's an aggressive act, okay? So the frog, it's like the same plot, but the frog once he's in the princess's room, is just upon her in her bed, so she slams him against the door, and this aggressive act made the frog turn into a prince. And once he has been turned into a prince, well, now she has a man in her room and they just fall asleep. And I put, where is the consent? Where is the consent in this story? What are we teaching our children? It's just like, oh yeah, I was enchanted, but now you saved me. Tomorrow we're gonna go off to the kingdom. Can I sleep in your bed now? And you might wonder who the hell was Heinrich from the title of this story. It was his servant, and his servant was so happy once, like he was driving them in this carriage. He was just happy because his master was so happy and fulfilled right now. What's the moral of this story? Somebody in one of the sources that I was reading, somebody said, well, the moral in this story is that love hurts. Sure, or that we should ask for consent, or that we shouldn't let frogs stalk us. Maybe, you know, animals can be stalkers apparently, that's what I've learned from this story. Yeah, love hurts, my ass. Change of setting, had to turn on the light because the darkness is upon us. Yeah, sure. Yet another story of another epic, amazing, award-winning stepmother is of course the Snow White. So the version you know and love and truly obsessed with way too much because of a mirror on the wall is the one where Snow White's dad remarries to this evil stepmother who wants to be the fairest and the most beautiful one around the block. So she apparently can't stand competition and can't stand her own stepdaughter being prettier than her, even though she's not competition. The logic that they didn't think the pre-plot through, but hey. So one day, when this kid has now sort of grown up, she asks her magic mirror on the wall, as she does every day because she's petty as fuck. So she's like, hey, magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And the mirror is like, yeah, it's Snow White, ain't you no more. And she is flipping. She lost it. She asked one of her henchmen to bring the Snow White into the forest and to kill her. And the henchman had mercy because he kind of like explained to Snow White what the hell is happening. She's like, yeah, she's a psycho, I need to do something though, I need to bring like your heart to her or some shit. She's like, yeah, cool, take this pig's heart and let me live. It's like, okay, cool, sure, why not? Not knowing, no one's aware there's this magic mirror that knows everything. They will snitch on them the very next day because this woman is petty, she literally asked this mirror the very next day. But the Snow White found this house with the dwarves, and yeah, she just, you know, made it her home. Well, they've kind of found her sleeping on their bed, and they're like, yeah, you wanna do some work around the house while we go to the mine? And well, she's like, sure, yeah, whatever. But now the next day comes around, the stepmother is there like, hey mirror, what's up? Who the fairy is? And the mirror is like, she's still Snow White, like, you boring ass bitch. So she's like, I need to kill this woman myself. So she just disguises herself because she's bored again. She disguises herself and then goes to the house of the dwarves, finds Snow White. He's just offering her different things every day. She's like a salesman, creepy ass salesman. Be like, hey, here's a comb, let me comb your hair. Here, here's this like lace scarf, like let me put it over you. Those items make her faint but not die, until one day she comes with actual food. She comes with an apple. And as soon as she bites through this apple, Snow White collapses. And the stepmother is like, finally, like, you only took me 3 costumes. This is like 3 Halloweens worth of costumes now. So the dwarves mourn the Snow White, and they bury her in this glass casket and just leave her in the middle of the forest, because why the fuck not? Decomposition, nobody knew about it. Corpse smells, nobody knew about it. Great, but hey, this turns out to be great, because this prince randomly who wanders around the forest comes up on, finds this casket, and he's like, yeah, let me just bring her and bury her into an actual grave. And as he does and carries this casket, well, apparently he slips, she falls out and spits up this apple bits, because again, digestion, they don't know how it works. So Snow White is just, you know, alive and well, and she marries the prince. Everybody lives happily ever after. Best picture of the story. Oh, now she's, you know, fondling with the prince. So now she's like, yeah, oh my god, prince, yeah, let's get married. But of course, the very next day, her stepmother is again talking to her fucking mirror because she's a petty ass bitch. She's like, hey mirror, what's up? You know the drill. Tell me what I want to know. And the mirror is like, oh no, the fairest is the prince's bride. And she's like, sorry, what? Who the prince? Who the bride? So not knowing who the bride is, she drops at this wedding unannounced, but the prince recognizes her as a threat. She's like, she's shady, she has the eyes full of rage. So he asks her to wear red hot iron slippers until, and dance for them, until she drops dead because of what she has done to Snow White. That's just like, it's not even like, oh, they live happily ever after. No. The story ends with revenge, okay? This is serious business. You gotta like have revenge onto the fucking stepmother. So, yeah, the moral of this story is avenge your bride, avenge all of their sins. It's like, yep, she did poison them, but she didn't make them suffer like a psychopath. Hey, you can't have a win-win situation in these fairy tales. Now, the original story. Well, there's a couple of versions, but there is one where I was like, yeah. Because there's this version where they say like Snow White might have actually been a real person. Okay, hear me out. not everything happened. That would have been a bit cuckoo. If there was a magic mirror on the wall, I'd be like, okay, maybe not. Somebody was high as a kite. There was this German historian, Eckhard Sander. According to him, in 16th century Bavaria in Germany, there was this girl, Margaret von Waldeck, who fell for a prince who later ended up being Philip II of Spain. Margaret's father and mother disapproved of these relationships because they said they would be like politically inconvenient. So it's speculated that here that the king, so Philip's dad, sent some agents, Spanish agents, to kill Margaret, and she ended up being poisoned. I love how the person who wrote this article was like, oh cool, so there's nothing much relating it to the plot. Like, okay, cool, there's no stepmother or anything really of this story, but what about the 7 dwarves? Were there any dwarves here? Which is like legit question, let's be honest. Well, that is the creamiest part of this story, and again, doesn't make it any more real, but just love that we know it. Basically, Margaret's dad kind of had slaves. So, well, the laborers that were that malnourished and maltreated that their size was limited and that they couldn't actually grow because they didn't eat enough ingredients and they weren't exposed to enough sunlight. So, yeah, slaves. And now they were like, okay, cool, how are you connecting this to this story? Where is the poisoned apple? So of course, I had a prepared answer for that. Basically, there's this German boogeyman story. Well, in this article they said it's a historical event, so great. Where the German merchants would give a child a poisoned apple when they would try to steal fruits of them. Just like, you know, you just try to nick fruits, like, no, I have one better, ooh, steal what I give you. Don't trust anybody, that's the moral of all of these fucking stories. But yeah, that was a morbid ass ending. Also, do you see any connections? Do you see many connections with this Snow White thing? I just found it super interesting. Like, no, it's based on a real person, let's try to fit stuff in it. You're like, no, this is an invented fucking story. Your story is not as dramatic, it's not good, it's not fucking fiction, okay? Chill, it doesn't have to be a fairy tale. I love how some of them were like not even forcing that happily ever after. They're like, nah, chill. They lived happily for a few years, then, you know, you'll never know what happened. I'll never tell. XOXO, Gossip Girl. Okay, it's time. It's time to depart. But yeah, that would be the series on me destroying your childhood hopes and dreams. And if you know any other story where you're like, this would be sick, Maya, this would be sick to be broken down, drop it down in the comments. And I would very much appreciate if you like this content or like this video. If you like my content in general, apart from this video, then yeah, subscribe, and then I come up in your feed and you're like, whoa, what is she on about now? What story is she ruining for us today? You're welcome. I don't have an outro, so I have nothing else to add and nothing else to say. So this is a goodbye. You go live yourself a happily never after, okay? Bye. 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 Oh, am I in a shop? Oh no, I'm out. Hi, hello, you look lost, but I think you were just found.